Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Entrican, coming to you on Thursday, February 6th. We've got some updates about Tidewater, as well as some rumblings about additional reinforcements on the way. Plus, we're going to talk about how the preseason is developing for the lads down in Florida at IMG Academy as they continue to prepare for their opener, not their home opener, but just their regular opener. And it's just 37 days away. Joining me, as always, to go over everything and in between is the co-host with the most, Jason Carey. Jason, how is it going, my friend?
Doing well. One more week down until the kickoff of the season. We're getting closer.
Just chipping away at it, just like we saw some of our boys trying to chip a crossbar shot earlier today. I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like I could have been a little better until I saw that the PTSD kicked in, watching Noah and JJ attempt that crossbar challenge. You know, the dedicated fans immediately hit us up, went on the Discord and said, oh man, like, we recognize that field. We recognize that timestamp. And that was just a day or two before couldn't get finished. We couldn't get across the finish line at Widener Field in Colorado Springs for that USL Cup final.
Widener Apartments Field?
Yeah, that is interesting business that has been done. I don't know enough about it. When we had Brett on early, I mean, we're talking in season 2, you know, he had kind of talked about how the ownership groups within the USL and the way it's structured, that there were some pioneers, there were some visionaries, some luminaries, if you will, and that I forget the name of the family that owned it before, but they had been really, champions of evolving the sport within the league. They had specifically gone about and saying, like, this was a team that had to create something from nothing, and then the next thing you know, they're over there saying, hey, like, we're going to build this brand new stadium, we're going to make this team what it can be. And then they go and win the USL Cup final and then go, we did it all. Like, they're going out on a high, and now we're going to sell it to that apartment complex, which, for those of you that went to the game or maybe even saw the pan up, it's the apartment complex that towers over the field. So it's like some of the best views you could ever watch.
Yeah, apparently the bar attached up to the roof there is a great place to watch the game.
There's a bar there. I thought that was just like the communal space for all of the dwellers of that apartment complex.
I could be wrong, but I heard that there was potentially a bar up there.
I mean, I'm sure they were drinking, right? So one way or another, there was a bar. Maybe it wasn't
a personal bar.
It was closed to the public, but nevertheless, so been lots of things going around. We're going to cover a little bit around the league today, and then get you guys up to speed on what's going on for Rhode Island FC specifically. Like I said earlier, around the player signings that we've heard about, and then just kind of catch you up. But before we go any further, I wanted you to know, maybe, I don't know if you know this yet. I think I saw it in the Discord. But did you know that you have a fellow Power Ranger now in the Power Ranger squad, Mr. Blue Ranger?
We're assembling all of them.
I mean, Koke Vegas now officially, unofficially, the Red Ranger, as dubbed by Noah Fuson. So, I mean, you've got the team. Who's the next one? If you had to pick on the spot, who are you giving one of those Ranger accolades to?
Yeah, that is a good question. On the spot, I don't know.
I
mean, like, color wise, like, I guess because he does have like a red alternate kit. I did see the picture, and they superimposed the Red Ranger's helmet over him. I'm not sure how we're deciding this. We do have Zachary Harivo in the original run of the Power Rangers. The Black Ranger was named Zach, so I don't know if he has any attachment to that. Then we need yellow.
You've got Jackson Lee in a green kit.
Okay.
I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out
Green
there.
Ranger. Okay, so we're going to expand to all 6.
Jackson Lee could make a great Green Ranger. I'm throwing it out there. He's got all the vibes. He's got all the charm of one. But hey, this isn't not a Power Rangers podcast. Okay, I don't even know if that exists. I'm sure that exists. Dude, there's a podcast for everything these days. You'd be surprised. But let's get into this. So just kind of bouncing around here, some quick news, some quick feeds. This is one of my favorite things that happened today, no less. In some random news, I found a business connection. So someone reached out to me on Instagram asking to collaborate and share some of their content. And we get this all the time, by the way. Like, I always love when people do it, especially like USL level content creators. Like, it's something to help grow all of each other's brands and whatnot. At the occasional weird one, and I feel like this is how we've kind of stepped into a bigger space, is every once in a while I'll get players that like reach out and say, hey, this is my tape. This is how good I am. Can you please put me in contact with Coach Kano? And it's like, I don't like, all I can say at that point is like, hey, you look like a great guy. Here's the official like inquiry process to do an open tryout or just to like get the club's attention. So those are always interesting. But so today, we found a new principal owner and investor
Another one
within Rhode Island FC. And we've always hinted that like, the list is always expanding. There's more than just a handful of the ones that people know. But since this is now public knowledge, because if you go and consume what we're about to share, like it kind of, I feel like we can get away with giving this out. College coach Mark Gottfried of, like North Carolina fame, of Alabama fame. He actually most recently was the coach at Cal State Northridge. He did an interview with founder and owner Brett Johnson and talking about what I thought was kind of what you'd seen Brett Johnson do recently. Is he's gone on this like circuit or this tour of a lot of podcasts in both the entrepreneur space, the sports administration space, and then like the actual soccer product space. And he's just been talking about, how you can be successful in having a club at any level of division. And sometimes Ipswich gets brought into that a lot, but he just goes on and talks. And there's a lot of the similar talking points. So when I got this, I was like, okay, we're going for another one of these. And then like within the first 30 seconds, Mark just drops like, oh yeah, us as principal investors. I was like, wait a second, hold on. This man is in on the inside. And it was good to find out. So this conversation, it's not the standard, like if you and I were interviewing Brett. It's like a conversation between two people who own an asset and like want to talk about the success, the trials and the tribulations of that ownership. It was really exciting. So we're going to drop the link to this podcast. It was incredible to learn some of like what they were going through as the owners. One of my favorite parts of it was when Brett Johnson just straight up said, Governor Raimondo at the time had asked him to consider and find a way to have Rhode Island FC play within McCoy Stadium. Like, could you just imagine if Tidewater had never happened and we did get Rhode Island FC, but it had happened in a different part of Pawtucket at a dilapidated minor league baseball stadium? Like, we could have been the next El Paso, the next Memphis, rest in peace, playing. Well, actually, I guess it would have been more like the Tampa Bay Rowdies, right? Like the stadium would have been ours at that point, but it would always have the history of being a baseball stadium.
I would love it for the memes, but at the end of the day, soccer-specific stadiums are so much better. I like the part where he hinted at there being another team coming, maybe a potential Super League team.
So yeah, so I mean, spoilers, right? Like he said this multiple times. Like we heard about it long before it entered the public domain of, he wanted to bring a women's team. When I first talked to Brett about this, like it was very casual, and he's like, I'm bringing it next year. And I was just like, whoa, like that's fast. Like, Brett, you got to get a stadium online. We have no idea where this team, we're talking, I think this was May of last year. And like, you don't know where the men's side of this is going to like shake out. You may have to work harder to win over the state. Obviously, it's been a lot easier just considering the performance. But he was like, I'm bringing the women's team in immediately. It's going to be run by women. It's going to be a women's team. It's going to be awesome. And, and he's let that idea mature, develop a little bit more. And I think he understands that like stadium is the first priority. But yeah, you're right. He went on to talk about that. He went to talk on about not just the women's soccer team, but a rugby team and a women's rugby team, a professional lacrosse team. Like he really wants to make Tidewater, and we've said this, right? We've hinted at it. He really wants to make Tidewater this outdoor entertainment mecca that goes beyond. Like his goal is there's 100 dates in the calendar year that are filled with activities that can funnel money into the organization, into the development area, and to make this more than just a soccer stadium. And so, like, going back to all the people like, oh, soccer's done, blah, blah, blah. It's never been about just the soccer. The soccer's the jewel. It's the crown, like, anchor point. But, like, at the end of the day, we're going to have other things here. We went to Monster Truck last weekend. That was amazing. Imagine Monster Truck I don't know how that works. Like, can that hurt the turf? I don't know these understandings, but like, imagine having Monster Truck's Gravedigger just 20 feet up in the air in front of Tidewater. Like, I'm in all the way.
I mean, maybe they can just remove it and throw some dirt down. I don't know.
I don't understand. It's gonna be the first question we ask Paul is just when we get the pre-Tidewater episode out. It's like, hey, how do Monster Trucks work? That's just gonna be the only question. Let's see what he does with it. So
I don't know. Similar to magnets, I imagine.
How do they work? If anyone knows how a magnet works or understands that reference, please drop it in the chat. But let's continue to move on. I think we're ready to declare that the soccer wars have officially ended. They're over. Chat, MLS U.S. soccer, NASL's cooked, as they say at this point. But we kind of talked about it last week and the implications that USL would have in it. MLS was able to announce, and we'll throw the official piece up on the screen here. Major League Soccer is pleased that the jury found for the U.S. Soccer Federation and Major League Soccer in dismissing the meritless claims filed by the NASL. The jury's verdict confirms that this case was nothing more than an attempt by NASL to deflect blame for its own failures. Since our inception in 1996, MLS has been dedicated to making the necessary investments to elevate the sport of soccer and provide an exceptional experience for players and fans. Today, our focus remains unchanged, and we look forward to furthering our efforts to grow soccer in North America.
I don't mean this to imply that they're like guilty or anything, but it does kind of sound like that meme where like we've investigated ourselves and we found that there was no wrongdoing.
I mean, listen, I've seen press releases in the past. That one seems kind of childish. It's like we had to spend a lot of money to defend ourselves. It was a frivolous instance. Sure, there could have been truth to it, but you know what? We're awesome. We've been found of no wrongdoing, so we will continue all of the wrongdoing that we can get away with for the rest of time. And that's the reality.
It's
right?
Like a wrestler speech. I'm not surprised after some of the nonsense we talked about last week, where some of the ownership groups were really not well run. They didn't know what they were doing half the time. That being said, like I don't know if this really clears them. Not that there's like a smoking gun out there that shows like, oh, MLS and US soccer are the bad guys. But I wouldn't be surprised if they made some decisions here and there to really kind of squeeze NASL out. In the same way that we've talked about a lot of the decisions that MLS has made that kind of feel like an attack on USL. So I think at this point, MLS has so much money that they, in a way, are bigger than US soccer, especially because US soccer, in the grand scheme of things, hasn't really done anything. Or, as much as we want to like, oh, Gold Cup champions, all this and that, like anytime we face one of the big boys, we always get swatted away. So in the grand picture of the world scheme, we're not really a big soccer nation in that regard. So the cash flow into the U.S. Soccer Federation honestly isn't that big.
We got Evan in the chat writing, NISA should file the next lawsuit. Well, see, that's the thing, right? With these kinds of cases, and the reason this was so important and what it means for the USL is that usually once the first case fails, it gets harder and harder to go back to the table and prove your claim. It works both ways, in fact, because like if they had found collusion in antitrust deceptions, then they would have said, okay, well, USL, what's your beef with US soccer? And then USL could have opened Pandora's box. It becomes a
kick him while he's down kind of thing. Everyone gets their turn.
Right. So this makes it intimately more difficult now to prove if any other soccer organization has problems when it comes to the competitive nature of what US soccer has set up. And that's really what this ties back into the USL is people had said, if you can prove that there was antitrust deviation, then this opens up a much easier path forward for Division I sanctioning, because you can say like, hey, like who are you to say you're in control of all these decisions when you're basically helping one league without any kind of same equal treatment to the other. So at this point, like I see the path forward for USL being able to use this as the scapegoat mechanism to become a Division I sanctioned league. I think that door has now officially closed with this lawsuit coming to an end. That doesn't mean that USL can't find its own way within the parameters that US soccer has set. That also, though, unfortunately doesn't mean that US soccer can't continue to move those goalposts to keep that differentiation between the two leagues from a divisional standpoint. So, really, I mean, at the end of the day, if you trust in USL, if you trust in like the visions of Brett Johnson, we're hoping, assuming ProRail will come one day, and it really does look like USL is trying to basically build their own soccer pyramid within the soccer pyramid. So where you kind of set the tone on like which one is the league that you want to consume, that becomes a different standpoint. But in terms of future partnership between US soccer, MLS, and USL, I think we're going to see a lot less of that in the near immediate future, other than like transfers up and down. And I don't know that we'll necessarily get the same kind of equal treatment from all three organizations.
Yeah, I would love for USL to just do their own thing, go in the way of like, let's set up our own pyramid, do our own thing, not worry about what the other guys are doing, and let the fans make the decision. Put out the best product that you possibly can. and from there, the fans will decide.
Yeah, and I mean, in a certain extent, that's exactly what the Jägermeister Cup is starting to expose us to, right? Like, if you look at what this is, it's not just the USL one teams getting a shot at the championship. It's also showing fans of both leagues that, hey, like, there can be some really good competition. You don't need to dismiss USL one out of hand because it's a lower division. The same way people would say, don't dismiss the championship from your MLS stewardship, right? I'm heavily interested in the Hearts of Pine outside of our matchups. Like, I want to see them grow, and I'll be interested to watch them this year. I don't know how I'm going to do that just yet. I assume ESPN Plus for USL One games, but that's something to get excited about, right? It's going to be one of those things that we just kind of have to wait and see. But either way, USL isn't doing anything rash. They're not doing anything quick, and we'll see it all kind of unlock. Speaking of things to unlock, though, moving along, US Open Cup schedule is now out for round one. Now, I know a lot of you are probably going to ask, why are you talking about round one? We're not in round one. Well, of course we're not. But it is important to understand why we want to go over round one. And that's because these are now most likely the teams that we will likely face depending on the results between rounds 1 and round 2. Last week, if you had been watching the show, we had talked about all of the potential regional lineups that we could have, but we didn't know their opponents. We knew that they couldn't all play each other across both rounds, so there were going to have to be some external, like, close by contingents that would have to help support the total numbers to be filled out. And it was a guessing game at that point. Well, now we know them. So in round 1, we have Hartford Athletic versus the New York Shockers. We've got Hearts of Pine versus CD Falanese. We've got FC Motown versus Westchester Soccer Club. Loudoun United versus the other Westchester United, the Long Island Rough Riders versus the Charlotte Independents, the Columbus Crew 2 versus the New York Renegades, FC Cincinnati 2 versus Pensaprian Freedoms, and then New Jersey Alliance Football Club versus the Chattanooga Red Wolves. So what that really means, team, is that it's basically one of those things of saying all these other teams like Columbus Crew 2, FC Cincinnati 2, now Loudoun thrown in the mix. These are most likely the same teams that if they advance and best their opponents, we could see them in the third round when they advance, right? Because, like, there is a path forward when you look at this that not all of these teams, we could lose all of the Northeast regional teams immediately and then be up against, surprise, Charlotte Independence once more. So it's important to understand it. I don't know if there's any teams immediately that kind of call out to you, like, who would we want to play? Who would we want to see advance further? Or if the names still remain the same in, like, Hearts of Pine and Hartford.
Do we pull a Homer Simpson, like disappear into a bush and show up with New York Soccer or Shocker kind of jerseys?
Oh, I'm 100% a New York Shocker fan.
Or are you in the camp that we want them to advance so that we can knock them out ourselves? Because I still think that we're playing them too much. So I would rather just play another team. That's kind of the fun thing about this tournament is you get exposed to all these different teams. Like, oh wow, I didn't even know this place existed, and they have their own little soccer team. Like, that's cool.
I'm gonna leave it to the chat to decide that. There's a part of me that wants to not see Hartford. I mean, in a weird way, I kind of want to see the Charlotte Independents again and just revenge them, because it's the only way we could do it. But I think I agree with you, because on the off chance, because again, we still have not been able to confirm. I believe that game will be an away game for us. I definitely don't want to play Hartford at Trinity Stadium. I don't want that. So maybe if we could have them at Tidewater, I'd be more receptive to it. But without that, I'm not interested in doing this song and dance of like five matches this season back and forth. So yeah, no, right now I'm a New York Shockers fan, and if they can come here, like, we'll play them next. I'm really more focused on advance out of round 3 and then get that Revs game, hopefully home, in round 4. I'm kind of trying to project past that into the future. Ready to move on?
Yeah.
So last week we had kind of joked around about, marquee signings and, the David Beckham, the Lionel Messi, the Didier Drogba effect within the soccer system here in North America. And we had said, like, do we need one of those players that fits the bill of increasing the attractiveness, but also increases the talent within the league? Well, I'm going to ask you, when we talk about X factors, does Sebastian Blanco now joining the Miami FC, does it check all of those boxes? Is Miami making a statement here, or are they taking a gamble? Because I looked at Blanco's record for last year. He's a year removed from being a DP in the MLS system with the Portland Timbers, but he only played 10 games and was primarily a sub for San Lorenzo last year. Scored 1 goal and played only 300 minutes in an entire season. What's our thoughts here?
Yeah, I did see his lack of minutes, I should say, last season, but also I think in a way he went to a better league than the MLS. So I'm kind of not surprised there, especially with his age. He's getting up there 36. So, but he was a very good player in the MLS. I remember watching him in some kind of West Coast clashes there with the Portland Timbers. I mean, are they just getting the gang back together? 2018 Portland Timbers to the USL. I mean, it's kind of funny the way that they went out and signed a bunch of players who used to be together. I'm curious to see how he'll do. Players like that still retain their talent, but will they be able to handle the physicality? Combine that with the fact that as an attacking mid, you are making passes that like are your teammates going to be able to get to the spot that you're going to be able to place that ball to? Combine that with a bunch of these stadiums are on turf. That's not great for older legs. I think it's an interesting move.
It kind of reminds me of Pirlo when he joined New York City FC, and even on the smallest soccer stadium within MLS, like he would just do a pass and like stand in the midfield, and then kind of like the Lionel Messi of today, and just like walk a few feet one way, walk a few feet the other, pass. And like if the player didn't understand his vision of it, he'd get angry. Like, well, no, I set you up on a massive like opportunity here. So it's interesting to see. I will say to your Portland Timbers joke of the USL, I think that moniker might be a little too soon because the Portland Pickles have announced that the Portland Bangers will be entering USL 2 next season, and it's being ran by Timbers legends Diego Valeri and Jorge Villafana. I don't know if that's a sign of good things to come or just craziness there within, but what a name! What a name!
Yeah, that's kind of an amazing name. I don't know what happened to my video feed. I assume my audio is still because it's the same machine. But so we've got the Portland Bangers. Is there like a rival that they could have Bangers and Mash?
Oh,
I mean, that would be a great matchup right there.
I gotta run your jokes through the quality control before. Wow. I mean, neither one of them is British, so like you're talking about a guy. I think Jorge Villafana is from Mexico,
at, like,
and then
every city in country and like state in this. We took all of our names from them anyway. Might as well just continue the jokes,
Yeah, so Jason's working on his camera problems there. He'll probably reset here for a second, but while he does, I mean, you can still hear him. That's the best part.
In the meantime, let's move on. You had another joke ready to go tonight. You wanted to talk about this. I thought it was funny because I'd made the joke already online, but you had some words about a new USL 2 team coming into the league.
Yeah, so Sporting Lex, they went to the championship. Well, they decided it was too much for them, and now they are officially a USL 2 team now. So,
hey, listen, a team that was in USL 1 at the end of last season promotes themselves in the offseason, and before that first kickoff, they relegate themselves back down to a league lower than the one they had started in. If that's not, I mean, you guys wanted Pro Rel. Here it is. Now, educate everyone. It's ruining the audio. He says we'll get that fixed here in a second, but educate everyone on the fact that you were talking about it being a USL 2 team. I saw a lot of people actually complaining themselves about why this was such an issue, because when they posted it, there was a lot of confusion around the league today. So what did you find in that exploration?
So it's actually just a youth team that they're just is going to operate under the same kind of pretense of we are Sporting Lexington, but it's going to be a USL 2 team. So I'm personally not a huge fan of this in terms of these other teams. I would prefer them to be distinct. It feels very MLS Next Pro, where you're like, here's all these different iterations of the same team. But at the end of the day, they don't have any identity as a 2 or, a second version, like a lesser version. Who's going to be like, oh man, Portland Timbers 2 fan? Portland Timbers aren't for me though. Like it just doesn't make any sense. Like I understand that you do need some sort of, when you become a slightly bigger club, you need some sort of youth kind of academy, but that should be its own type of development thing where you just say, hey, this is Sporting Lex. It's a youth squad that we're playing, and we're going to play against, Louisville's, other division team, in terms of like, they aren't in a real division. It's more of this is just to get youth players minutes.
I've said the same thing where it's, I've asked about the need for the academy system across the league. Obviously, it's worked successfully in a lot of places, but to your point, they're not playing in USL2. I mean, USL2 really is primarily a collegiate summer affair. It's something where the players that need to remain sharp, that want to continue and kind of collaborate with other players that maybe didn't get their fair shot in a college system they're trying to get into. It's a way for them to showcase their skills, right? And I've even heard that there's conversation around like the NCAA and the different groupings of tournaments that like, hey, what if we all just merged under one league system, because it's complicated, right? You've got like the Sun East division, you got the Big Ten, those things. Like how do you get the equity of play? So like for me, like I look at USL2, it is developmental, but it doesn't, then you're playing college players against, like 14-year-olds. Like academies shouldn't be blended in here. And if this is the step USL wants to do, I think it's a bit of a wrong direction, but we'll see. USL2 as it stands, like when you look at like the Open Cup competition, it's one of those things nowadays where it's not coming back into, it looks like, at least for now, it's not coming back in a way where it's going to be able to compete with USL1 or championship side teams unless they're the winner of their entire regional tournament. So with that being said, like it's not a big deal, but in terms of branding, it does get very confusing. And this could be a kind of, just call it a heads up to the ownership group. If we do a women's team and we call it Rhode Island FC, that's not good. Like that's going to be a little bit confusing when it comes to brand control and brand recognition. So like I kind of hope that from a Rhode Island standpoint, we don't announce that the USL Super League team will be called Rhode Island FC. Not because we are, ashamed that they share the space, but we want them to be their own thing. We want them to have their own brand and design. Louisville is a great example of it's Racing Lou and then it's Louisville, right? So like I see the problems, I see the qualms competitively and just branding. It doesn't make sense. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if they shared some of the same color schemes and things like that to make it easy, but it would be cool if they had their own identity and not just RIFC women team.
I could not have said that better. So let's move on. While you try to continue to work on your camera, you just want me to be here looking like I'm by myself. I understand.
I don't know if there's anything I could do without breaking it.
That's fair. Listen, the studio, I mean, it is cold, by the way. It is very cold in here. I'm assuming we are, just because we're subarctic here, that the equipment's just not working well. We didn't heat it up ahead of time. And I only blame Rhode Island Energy for my like ridiculously large bill. You'd think for a club that has that patch on the kit, we'd get some sort of discount on our power supply for being season ticket members. Oh my goodness, that bill is getting higher and higher as the days get longer. I can't. So yeah, it's like 48 degrees in this room right now, and it will stay that way until the sun heats it up on its own accord. But let's move on. Talking about power, great transition to an old brownfield power site. Lots of conversation has been kind of building around the fandom about the stadium site, about the parking, about the ticket member like benefits. It's been a bit of an like, because in the absence of news, people are trying to create their own news, and it's been kind of fun to sit back and watch, and people are saying like, oh, I have this feeling that there won't be enough parking spots. No one has talked about the parking, so we are in danger zone catastrophe.
I guess at least we've moved on from there not being a stadium.
What progress has been made? We moved from the stadium will never get built to how will we all park at the stadium? Baby steps. When you want to build a stadium in Rhode Island, baby steps. Same thing back to McCoy, by the way. They were talking about a time capsule. Librarian and basically Rhode Island history buff Tim McDuff, he brought up this article about a time capsule that had been buried under McCoy, and they're trying to find it as they excavate the site. And in the article that was talking about the time capsule, the mayor then, Mayor McCoy, was like, you know what? All these people hate that we're building a stadium here. They just need to get over it. Okay, progress is going to happen. You're going to want this in 50 to 70 years, and you're going to look back and be like, you're being silly. Like, this is something you want. Trust us. Those same people now hate the fact that the team left them and that the stadium is being torn down. So I look at this as Rhode Island FC earning its dues, you know, having to put in the work to win the hearts and minds of the Pawtucket residents over. But that being said, we just want to go over what we know because there's been a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of feelings, a lot of accusations. So let's just clear the air with what we can share, what we know, and then you guys can continue to make your summations and your opinions to yourselves. What we know is this one, and this is pretty common knowledge, but the plan for parking and the overall fan experience has already been submitted to the city because the city needed to understand what would that look like, what resources were going to be required, what did the police involvement look like, all like what did utility workers, public workers, like what did that all need to be, how did the traffic zones look like, and so that was all submitted over 30 days ago, and the city approved it with some modification requests. So there's going to be like one final, like, okay, here's the final. That being said, we've learned that there will be a minimum of 4,000 available parking spots within a defined vicinity of the stadium. Now, we don't know the radius. I remember from an interview with Mayor Grebe way back in season 1 for a Christmas episode, I remember talking to him and they had done an analysis that there were over 10,000 spots readily available within the city of Pawtucket when you counted street parking and whatnot. So like 10,000 was the ceiling, 4,000 is now the floor.
We actually went over there the other day just to kind of take a look. We parked nearby, kind of walked around to the best of our ability right behind the fences and kind of got some different angles, even went around over the bridge and under and went to kind of where the parking was. And honestly, the stadium is looking amazing. I don't think the pictures do it justice if you haven't seen it yourself. Not to tell you to go over there, but I think you will be surprised at how great it looks in person.
I did like the guy. Do you remember seeing the guy that was like leaning outside his window? I don't know if like we caught him smoking, but he was like leaning out of his window looking at, he's like, it's the house closest to Tidewater. He was on the top floor. Did you see that guy when we parked the car where we weren't supposed to?
I missed him.
He's just like staring at us like, oh, we had RFC gear on. We were being a bunch of nerds, but no, it is going to be incredible. And so to continue, you know, we're now at 4,000 spots, and you know, around the stadium itself, if we're being honest, those spots are mostly going to be reserved for VIP, for the players, for the staff. And when we're talking specifically players and staff, we've been told will park behind the stadium where they're tearing down the old Rhode Island Energy electrical building that was it was decommissioned a while ago. It just still stayed. So if you guys know that brick building that had been there, that's being torn down to create more parking spaces. And then the VIP will be in the lots immediately adjacent. So if you see a lot or if you see any kind of parking stripes near the stadium, that's going to go to the VIPs. After that, fans are going to park in, again, that general vicinity and that kind of expanded area. What we've also been told is that a portion of Taft Street, so that's the street that runs, you know, basically perpendicular to the stadium. It's the closest street that hugs the stadium. That will be closed or limited access to a certain degree to allow for fans to easily congregate and to access the stadium on game days. So you're not going to have that be a busy back and forth street for cars. Some cars will still need to go through because, again, it could be for players and staff, but it's primarily going to be like a street festival in a certain extent.
Yeah, and I think that we just have to remember that this is supposed to be a urban stadium development project. So if you've ever been to those type of stadiums, parking tends to be limited. The idea is usually to either walk kind of the remaining distance.
That final mile.
Yeah, and so the club is trying to make an effort to accommodate the traditional kind of American fan culture of tailgating, but still reinforcing the idea that not every, you know, we're not going to have a 10,000 spot giant empty lot to park next to it. The idea being that people will carpool, they'll take whatever public transportation, and it won't be readily available right away, but like there's the plan to build a bridge, the walking bridge, you know, there's bike paths, and there's a lot of different options for people to kind of maybe get somewhere close by and then kind of walk nearby and to either go to some sort of tailgating, maybe a nearby local spot, or even just go straight to the stadium. It tends to make for like a much better atmosphere than just these giant soulless lots where everyone just like kind of walks straight into the stadium.
Yeah, it'll definitely be better for game day atmosphere. And I'm glad you're touching on the talking point of the tailgating, because I know that's been one of the questions around parking. There will be tailgating. It will be limited. I don't know if that's limited to certain lots. I don't know if that's limited to one singular lot. We do know that will be there. So I imagine for that area, it will be a very highly coveted space. So like when that announcement comes out, if you're someone that's like, hey, I want to be doing tailgating, then that's something you're going to want to jump on. Additionally, if you're like, well, I want to do tailgating and I want my 4 friends to be able to park around me or near me, that may be one of those things. Like you're the base command. You've got the grill, the cooler, the chairs, and then like kind of everyone still parks wherever they can and then comes to you. But that will still be something that's made available. And I think back to the survey we put out on X around like what kind of way will you be commuting to the stadium, and about 70% of the people said they'd still be driving no matter what. The other 30, it broke down to walking, bicycle riding, or public or shared ride transit.
Boating
was not on there. Someone did DM me. They're like, well, you didn't put boating on them. It's like, listen, there's a limited amount of dock space for sailgating, I should say. We need the boat space, so I'm not going to advertise that. Okay, like that's for you and me.
Sorry, redacted.
Exactly. So I mean, and then when you think about it, right? So if we scaled that, if that's 70% of the people we surveyed, and those are some of the most dedicated, even if that number is wildly off, 70% of 10,000 fans, we know the average trip or ticket percentage when it comes to conversion is about 2 people at minimum to as many as 4 people are sharing one car. That's what they saw at Burn. So that's roughly 3,500 spots. When you look at like the 7,000 from the 70%, that's well within the parameters. So like, I really don't think parking is going to be as big of a deal. I think what will kind of get under people's skin is the confusion on how and where to park within the city. And then, there's going to be that person that like, I had to park 45 minutes away from the stadium. I had to walk 45 minutes to get in. And then like they ran out of RIFC Pale Ale. So I went home in the first 10 minutes and I hated the experience. Like I'm sure there will be someone like that. And I'm sure there will be growing pains, especially in game 1. But this is not going to be a long-term problem. So you're getting tailgating within a certain expectation. You're getting everything you need from a parking perspective. The real question, though, that no one has answered yet for me is if there's drinking allowed on a tailgate and they're trying to shut down this whole game day experience thing, how does that work with drinking in public? Because some places do it really well and strategic, and others it's like we catch you stepping out of the designated zone, and that's a ticket. So like I haven't heard anything yet. I'm assuming I'm assuming Rhode Island FC has partnered or has a plan in place. But could you just imagine Defiant 1636 doing their march, walking down Taft, all of them have a beer in their hands, and then like all of them just walk straight into like a police van and just get sent to City Hall for their ticketed crime of drinking in public. Like it could be a thing. Just saying.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But like you said, I think there will be a little bit of growing pains, but ultimately I think a lot of these kind of factors will get figured out.
Oh yeah, I'm not worried, and maybe it'll be a little awkward at first, but we'll get through it. And then just the other point I wanted to touch on, because I heard a little bit of noise about this last week. They were saying, what's the new thing for the season ticket members? We haven't heard anything about what we're getting. And that's always a fascinating thing to me, because you're getting the gift of 17 plus games at Tidewater Stadium. So like, I don't know what else more you want. You guys are just being selfish. But a couple people asked me directly, like, hey, like last year we got first annual scarf, are we getting scarves again? And I can either confirm or deny scarves, but having had some conversations with the marketing team, having had some conversations with the ticketing team, I think season ticket members are going to be very satisfied about what they'll find out that they're getting. The club is working as fast as possible. You have to understand that like they don't have a home game. I know the season starts for us in 37 days, but like for them, the season doesn't start basically for 87 days. So like you guys just got to have a little patience when it comes to the home dynamic there.
Yeah, I'm not worried. I think that they'll pull it out.
No real fan should be worried. Right, unless you're worried, like, hey, I've been charged 7 times for the same ticket and I already paid it. Like, then be worried because your credit card's been hacked.
That's a different problem.
Yeah, completely different problem. So let's move on to the preseason itself. Let's talk about the team down in Florida at IMG Academy. They left on Sunday to head down for a full 2 weeks of training. Coach Kano shot a picture and put it on his Instagram, and I'm it's Tampa Bay side, so it's the west side, and I see this sun and I'm like, oh yeah, that's that's a sunset. Good for him. He's getting all romantical with his picture landscapes, and then immediately in his story, another picture came up with the clock, and it was like 6:30 in the morning. Like, oh, Kano's trying to let everyone know the gaffer's up at the crack of dawn, and he's ready to get these guys into shape. I appreciate that, but other than that, not a lot of news coming out of the players. They're definitely getting a little bit more, let's call it not strict, but
secretive.
It's just like, hey, like what happens in preseason stays in preseason. It kind of feels like to a certain extent. One of the things I was hoping that we could glean is if the trialists, from like the Providence College guys, had headed down with the team, or if in the media days that we saw and the open practices, if those were like basically it's like a combine, right? Like that's an invitational. Thanks for coming out. You scrimmaged against the first team and like move on. Interestingly, we did have a fan of the podcast message us
who owns a satellite, so we could do some imaging of the grounds.
No, I wish. That's drone request number one. But no, so they had seen some of the footage that the club had put out. They had seen one of the pictures we had put out, and they were actually able to identify one of the additional players from the earlier weeks of the preseason, and that was Sergio Ors Navarro. He's a Spanish midfielder and a Mac Herman semifinalist out of West Virginia University. I don't know if we need another Spanish midfielder, or I should say, I don't know if we need another midfielder.
I don't know if you can ever have enough.
I want all the Spanish midfielders, but I don't know if we need another midfielder considering how deep we are. But the dude is also like 6'1", so let Kano cook, and we're going to talk a little bit later about how Kano's just the master of like finding versatility. So we don't know any more than that other than the player's name. We don't know if he traveled down, but we'll keep you posted as things go.
Midfielders.
We have center backs now playing wing backs. Hey, anything is possible. But in that regard, going on to the preseason itself. So the team did play a match earlier this week. On Tuesday, they had their official first preseason match against the Philadelphia Union 2. It was at an undisclosed location at an undisclosed time. We don't know the score, but we have been asking a lot of our friends in the business around the area, trying to get some things confirmed. And we do know a couple of things that we can share. So one, we are able to verify that Rhode Island FC did play Philadelphia Union 2. Just want to start at the bases here, get you guys set up for
allegedly.
No, this happened. That we can confirm that. We also learned that Rhode Island FC won the preseason game. So we were able to confirm that with outside sources that they did win the game. Well, we do not know the scoreline. We do not know the score. We don't know who scored. We don't know anything.
Own goals.
Maybe it was just like 5-3 all own goals. I don't know. The interesting thing that we did pick up, though, is that from the Philadelphia camp, we did learn that this was not just the USL versus like MLS Next Pro kind of thing that some people thought this might be. When you look at the current conditions of the Philadelphia Union 2, they let go of a lot of their players and have not officially introduced the next crop of their academy. So what we've been told is that this MLS Next Pro side was filled out with a lot of the first team Union players. So I don't know if that was like, again, with these friendlies, you have to understand that it's usually, especially the first one of the preseason.
Was Jack McGlynn already traded?
He was already that, yes. Oh, so okay. That's where I was going to go with. He's already been traded. But yeah, these aren't like full 90 minutes games. These aren't even 60-minute games. The first game of the preseason, it was probably 30 minutes aside, and they probably rotated. They probably did 3 sets of it, and different teams that came in, different combinations of players. Some may have stayed for 60 minutes. Noah probably ran for all 90 because that's just what that guy has in him. So we don't know where the scoring happened. We don't know between which sets, but we have been told that the Philadelphia Union did incorporate a lot of their first team into that mix-up. So take from that what you want. It's the friendlies, it's the preseason. The points are made up and none of it matters, right? But if that makes you feel better, awesome. Hopefully we'll learn a little bit more with the game next week against Orlando City's first team. We do have some partnerships and some friendships down there, so we should be able to learn a little bit more.
Some fans online noticed that a certain Revolution are also at the IMG Academy. Do you think there's some alleged match in some undisclosed location at an undisclosed time?
I mean, if any of that were to happen, it would absolutely be the Revolution, right? Because they did this last year with the Revs too. It was undisclosed, an undisclosed time, undisclosed location. I can totally see these two teams. I mean, they have a relationship, right? Whether you want to just look at it from the Jack Panayiotou effect, or just the relationship that Kano has with his old club, there's definitely something there. And so if you want to put two teams in proximity, I could totally understand it. On the Revolution side of things, they're a completely brand new team. I think there's 4 players left from, like, in total, not even just starters, from last squad. That's how much this team has been exploding.
I couldn't keep up with not that I, hashtag not an MLS podcast, not that I follow them, but the amount of moves that they've been like making,
astronomical.
Out of control,
off the charts. So from that perspective alone, Caleb Porter probably needs as many, competitive opportunities as he can. MLS teams probably aren't going to give them as many additional shots, but hey, USL team that wants to cut its teeth and you've got the runners up to the entire thing and they're local, I don't see why not. Personally, if I was either Coach Caleb Porter or Coach Kano Smith, there's a good likelihood they're going to see each other in the Open Cup in round 4. I'd want a taste of that. I'd want an early look to see what I'm going to be dealing with, and whether it's psychological or just a preparation for another time. I don't see why not. So yeah, anything is possible. We don't have anything confirmed. We know that the completely undisclosed opponent game, we know that that's Hartford now because Hartford made a mistake on it. So we shall see. But right now, as it stands, classic. So that's how it stands. So the team is still ready to go on. They'll be playing their next official preseason match next week before they then head out to Bermuda. I don't know if there's some downtime. I imagine there's going to be a day or two where they get to come home, see their families. Because remember that these are all players with wives, girlfriends, children. They've all been away. Like, they're not there with them. So I can imagine they'll get some downtime, maybe spend the weekend, get to, get back with their family and loved ones. And then they'll be heading out to Bermuda in that second week of February. You ready for the big news here? And real fast, Harry Austin writes in, evening from San Antonio. Wish I was able to be there for when SAFC San Antonio opens Tidewater Stadium. I don't know what they're going to open, considering they're going to get closed down and shut down with the first donut clean sheet in RFC history. Harry, I'm just kidding. Always enjoy you tagging on to the show.
Donut clean sheets.
Hey, I've heard Defiance has some ideas about how to celebrate clean sheets in the future. I won't say more, but it'll be interesting. You ready to move on to the big news of the night?
Big news. What's going on here?
We got a signing. Allegedly. Rumored. Maybe. I don't know. But let's talk about it. So we've got a now kind of been said by a couple different sources, at least either in retweets or in claims, but we have a rumored signing in one Alder Sanchez.
Oh.
Earlier this week, it was leaked by some accounts that RFC had already penned the contract for the former Sacramento Republic left back. Before we get started, I'll just kind of say what we know about the rumor. We've heard from around sources around the league, around the clubs, that there is a couple, if not maybe even 3 signings on the way to reinforce Rhode Island FC. We had a couple names floated out there. Sanchez's was not one of them in the mix, but I'll be the first to admit and tell you I don't know everything, and I'll never pretend to know everything. There are smarter people in this very room, and I'm not talking about Jason. I've got a dog that's sleeping behind me, and she's one of the smartest people I know. She gets treats out of me all the time. So, like, when I look at it,
trickster.
It's one of those things where we don't yet know for sure, but we'll kind of talk about why maybe this is actually very, very much a serious potential signing. Before we get into the depths of it here, I want to just kind of bring people up to speed on who Alder Sanchez is. He's a product of the Portland Timbers Academy and their 2 team, who went on to get drafted in the 2023 MLS Super Draft by DC United. From there, he went on to sign with Sacramento Republic, where he played for 2 seasons, racking over 3,200 minutes and scoring at least 3 goals last season specifically. Some sites say he had 4, but I can't find the 4th goal. What's interesting, Sacramento Republic did not pick up his club option at the end of last year and instead entered into that period of contract negotiation with Alder. Last we had heard he was still working with the Northern California club to confirm that. And then now we hear about this potential signing here with Rhode Island FC in New England. Jason, I've got some thoughts. I'd love to unpack what you've learned about this since we kind of started exploring if this was even possible.
Yeah, so when I heard about this rumor, I did a little digging to kind of learn more about him. And, I kind of like this. If we go through with this signing, I like it for a few different reasons. One, Quizera is a regular with the national team and is going to continue to miss matches throughout the season to represent his country. And, we had players who would fill in those roles, because everyone in the team is kind of a jack of all trades, but all of them have usually positions that they're better at, right? Need be Fuson could play out wide there or something, but he's not a fullback at the end of the day. He's more of a winger. So to have a good and or / competent backup, I think is needed so that we don't feel like we have to field a weakened squad while Quizera's out on international duty. And remember, he would play multiple games after, what is it, like a 14, 18, 20-hour flight over to Africa and then come back. And then we'd be like, oh, we have another game this weekend. So then we won't have to worry about rushing him back into the side. And then the second is that there's a reality that these players are going to attract interest. And Quizera is one of our better players. And especially him being capped by his national team, he's getting, recognized probably in other places in the world that maybe some of our other players won't. So in that regards, there's that kind of reality where you always have to be ready for the worst and expect that at some point these players will move on. And as coach likes to say, the squad is never done. So, I looked into some brief footage, some stats reviews. I watched a little podcast interview that he did, where one of his favorite moments in his first season was an assist that he got against Hartford. So, at that point I was sold.
I'm already, yeah. Coach, just announce it. We're good with this. Say no more. Say less, as they say.
Realistically, I don't think he's going to displace Jojea. But Jojea was, he was out for his international team. So I think it'd be very important to have someone that we could bring in. He's young. He's only 22. If you can say hey, realistically, you're not going to play all the time. But at the same time, Open Cup, we've got the Jägermeister Cup. There's plenty of opportunity to rotate and keep these players fresh and still get him a lot of good minutes. And at that point, maybe he could be someone for the future.
Yeah, I also haven't, and I love the concept about the international piece, because Coach went on to talk about how much that had hurt the club at times. I haven't watched much tape on him myself yet. I did go back and because he was from Sacramento, so I looked at that game to see if he was in there. He absolutely played in the RAFC versus Sacramento game, a game that we thought we basically blew the brakes off of Sacramento. We thought that was probably one of the first games that we should have won, that we couldn't kind of close it down on. I did see that he did play a part in the game. Ironically, in that particular lineup, he was playing as an advanced left midfielder, almost a winger. So there was a CDM and a designated fullback behind him. When I did go watch the tape, though, you hate to see it. Well, you don't, because he wasn't one of us at that time, but he absolutely gets demolished by Steven Turnbull on a across the field transition. So I think it was Jojea transitions the ball across the field, drops just a dime of a pass on Turnbull. Turnbull steps up and kind of checks Aldair. Sanchez goes flying to the side. Turnbull collapses and traps the ball down, takes 3 steps and just rifles it in for, I think that might have even been his first goal too. So you kind of hate to see this guy who you're trying to learn more about. The first thing you see is a defensive mistake that led to a Steven Turnbull goal. Turnbull, who we don't have now, and Sanchez, who we may be getting. I'm not going to say that one moment in time is something to hold him against for the rest of his career and his performances so far, but nevertheless, pretty interesting.
Yeah, he picked up 3 goals last season too. Not a huge amount, but for a fullback, that's a decent contribution. His stats weren't anything to write home about, but he did have some standout performances. And then the rest, his minimum was serviceable.
Yeah.
At 22 years old, with Jojea in front of him, assuming that this is potentially something that's really going to happen, like I said, I think it'd be a good backup, potentially maybe something for the future. Being around a professional squad, there's still plenty of development that he could kind of go on with him.
Yeah, and since this is still a rumor for the time being, we don't want to get into the stats. You can easily start to try to make the comparison. Is this the Gabby Alves replacement? And start looking at the stats and the numbers. We'll save that for if he gets confirmed and if he joins up. in addition to the reports we've received about Sanchez, it was discovered by Ryan Healy of Tide Talk that he actually slipped and posted an Instagram story that he is in Bradenton, Florida right now. So I used,
vacation.
Maybe. I mean, listen, there are a lot of teams at IMG right now, and so if all the stars are pointing that this is potentially a real thing, but you never say it until it's done. I reached out to the club for an official comment, and their response is that they only comment on when players have been signed, and they'll release that through a public statement, no more, no less. Based on all the indications, though, I have no reason to not. I mean, this is a position of need to a certain extent. He fits the right type of billing, especially if he's, again, that versatility of being able to play in a couple different roles. He was good enough to play for Sacramento Republic. I mean, the ironic thing here, he only lost his job. We kind of have to talk about this because Ryan Spalding from the New England Revolution took his job over and is now the new left back for Sacramento Republic. So I bet if they couldn't have gotten the upgrade in Spalding, there's a good chance Sanchez would have remained. You hate to always see a player get ousted like that. I kind of then say, like, oh man, well, I wish we could just have gotten Spalding, right? Get that Revs, conspiracy, the Revs like thing going even stronger.
Just see it continue egg him on. But do you think he would have wanted to come over here?
No, absolutely not. Because this, to your point, and we'll talk about it here in a second, but this is probably a depth signing, right? Like, which is going to be a challenge for Sanchez if he gets this role, because he's going to go from a starter. He'd had some trickled moments in the 2024 season. He wasn't always the starter, but that's going to change the dynamic of what his contribution looks like to the team. So that's why we couldn't have gotten a Spalding. And probably Ryan Spalding, he was an MLS player. He commands a lot more money than Aldair Sanchez does. So regardless, I give this right now a 4.5 anchors out of 5 if we're going to scale the rumor tracker. But again, we think this is a depth piece, right?
Yeah. I think ultimately a depth and, like I said, maybe potential for the future, see how he develops.
So, in that spirit, I kind of started thinking, if we had a depth piece, now this was before this rumor, right? Again, because we don't know if he'll be joining the team. If you look at what Coach Cano has been building this offseason, it's been kind of sneaky quiet around how he's trying to find the value of duality, right? Like players that can operate in multiple positions. Obviously, he likes his defenders usually pretty tall, which is why it's such a interesting change. Rivera and Sanchez both going to be a little shorter, but they're fullbacks.
Yeah.
They need the speed. I get it. But then you look at Noah. He's a winger. He's a forward. He's a midfielder. He's a wing back now. We've seen him on all of that. We already know No Darcy is basically getting converted into a right wing back when he can't play the center back role. We know that Rivera can play both fullback positions as well as a left midfielder. Sanchez, now we've talked about, and then we know Clay. Clay can play literally every position on the field, including goalkeeper. I guess I kind of want to ask, we know Cano is sticking to this system. We know that he knows the core players he identifies. Is this just more of the pieces that we need, or is this just because of the rotation that we have coming ahead? He wants to be able to have the interchangeability, the plug in here, the plug there. Are we basically set with the team as is? Do we have enough coverage to spread the wealth?
I'd say almost. I mean, I would still argue that we're kind of light up front in terms of forwards. We have 100 midfielders, which is great. Midfielders are the best, but did we find a replacement for Doyle? His contributions aren't huge numbers, but he put up a decent amount of minutes. If you went back and look at his stats, I think it was over 1,000. So I would just be concerned in terms of keeping the guys healthy up front, right? Last year we started the season without JJ, and then we had some kind of in and outs with Chico, and that kind of puts added pressure on them too in terms of not feeling comfortable to know that hey, I've got someone behind my back, instead of no, I'm the only guy, everyone else is injured. That's not a great position for the players and for the coach and the team to be put in. I mean, realistically, with the talent that we have, obviously it's got to be someone who's a depth piece, right? Maybe another type of future talent, a Kevin Ordoy, if you will, someone who doesn't even have a picture on the thing. We'll never see him, but he's a striker. And
Kevin Ordoy dressed for every home game that summer. How dare you? You've never dressed for Rhode Island FC. Don't you take this away from Kevin Ordoy.
You know what I mean?
USL Academy legend.
Someone essentially to be a part of the team and train with the team and be ready at the coach's need. but realistically probably won't see the field.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's what Sanchez is, right? So like, well, I
Well,
mean,
that's why
if you
I
want to talk
meant
about
specifically
Doyle,
for the forward, though.
yeah. So if you want to talk Doyle, I can say unless we find an MLS loanee or we're waiting for, again, like the Morris Dugan conspiracy, which I still think he's coming. I know that we just, got Rivera and, we have Taimu and potentially now we have Sanchez. Still think he's coming. We could sign another defender and I still think Morris Dugan is coming, guys. But I look at it this way. I agree with you that we don't have a like-for-like replacement in Mark Doyle. We don't have an additional winger. But when you look what's on the screen, this is, as I see it today, if we were playing tomorrow, our best 11 plus our bench, this is the bench that I see kind of being put out, right? I see Joe Brito, Mark Ibarra, Amos Shapiro-Thompson, Chico, Taimu Akiyoshi, Danny Rivera, and Jackson Lee. Like I think that's what this would be, right? To the point of depth, like we have a striker that is there because whether it's Noah and JJ and Chico, Noah and Chico, one of them is going to have, like, there's just not enough players unless you're Las Vegas Lights playing in the USL Cup or the USL East Western Conference. Was it Western? No, USL Western semis when they had a 12th man on the pitch against New Mexico United. You just can't make it happen, right? So we have a forward off the bench. Additionally, we know that Joe Brito can move up. He can be dangerous. He scored a few goals last season. We don't know anything about Amos Shapiro-Thompson. We still know he kind of plays in that forward pivot and likes to be really aggressive. Like, we know that about him. And then Mark Ibarra can like drop back and move Zach Haribo up. We saw what Zach could do. We could see what Clay could do if like one of those rotate. I really think the answer to your question about the Doyle is I think for now, we're going to have to really understand and reflect that Maxi Rodriguez is probably our offensive upgrade. Like, we've continuously thought, okay, he's the midfielder because he's an attacking midfielder and he's going to displace Mark Ibarra. But the reality is like, look how Detroit City used him last year. They never had a designated, I shouldn't say designated, wrong league, but like they never had a target forward. They never had a dedicated striker. They had wingers and then they had like people that they kind of threw at the top of the box. A lot of the times, and the reason that Maxi was so successful in his goal production last season and historically with Detroit City is he played that advanced role. He went beyond just being an attacking midfielder. The beauty with Maxi is he would also track back. He would go back to his midfielder roots, basically be box to box when he needed to and put in the defensive work, which is uncharacteristic of a striker. So like I could easily see how, he inverted Clay a couple times where Clay would drop all the way back to right back or right center back to change things up. But like we wanted to keep Clay on the pitch. I could kind of see that happening with Maxi, where they move Maxi forward a little bit, get a new, fresher midfielder who, can work the box to box, will spare Maxi the rest of his legs. Or, you'd mentioned earlier about rotation. We're going to have to rest some of these players. Maybe there's a game where Maxi doesn't start and suddenly he's your Mark Doyle. Could you like talk about an upgrade? Because remember, we were fine with Mark Ibarra, Zach Haribo, and Clay Holstead in that center triangle trio of the midfield. Imagine Maxi Rodriguez comes in as a off the bench substitute on an offensive opportunity. That's an upgrade, right? Like we're thinking so linear that like Maxi always has to start in this one spot, but we have to acknowledge that there's going to need to be some rotation this year amongst the team. I kind of see Maxi as the offensive version of Clay Holstead.
I think that's fair. Maybe I'm thinking too much of like traditional positioning. And, at the end of the day, Kano does seem to be the type of manager who can kind of get the job done with, a bunch of different options. He's got a bunch of different tools, players playing, willing to do whatever is asked of them, no matter where they're fielded. He's playing ultimate team, but looking only for compatibility, not like the position. He's just looking for the, like the friendship links.
That was always the best part. Like who knows who, what's the club connection? What's the nationality connection? How do I make the bond? How do I make the chemistry as strong as possible? Call me a scientist. I'm here to concoct. That was my favorite part about Ultimate Team. Listen, we don't know anything though, right? At the end of the day, the depth chart that you see on the screen, who knows? I don't know. It could be something, it could not. And we don't know what other additional signings are on the way that could disrupt the entire plan, right? Like we just have to wait, because if Morris Dugan does come back, Ugo Bacharak, I want everyone that's a fan of this club to just, this is it. It's Ugo Bacharak. I want you to put some respect on that and understand that he's going to be on the bench.
On his name.
Put some respect on the name, on the Spanish, not midfielder, but back lineman. Couple comments here in the chat. Robert Donald writes in, if the top 6 USL teams played the top 6 MLS teams, what would that outcome be?
I think they're realistically MLS will win most of the time. The reality is more of the top 6 are closer to the bottom / middle. I mean, if you look at the top 6 MLS sides, they're the amount of money that they have, 9 out of 10 times they'll probably beat us.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, the reality is this, right? Like, if they field their best players as well, like they took the game, like if you treat each one of these matches like it's the Open Cup final, MLS is winning every single one of those games, and they should. That's the beauty of it. Like, can there be a cup set? Yes,
absolutely.
Want to see it, but like, you're not going to tell me that. What was it? Let's see: LA Galaxy, LAFC, Columbus Crew, FC Cincinnati, Miami.
Even I know Atlanta United did lose in the Open Cup, but they also played they did, right?
Yeah, but you're just. I'm just saying. Well, no, not last year. They didn't play it last year. That was when they won the Open Cup. They almost won the Open Cup in 2023. Houston Dynamo beat Lionel Messi and the boys in the final minutes. So, I mean, hey, yeah, listen, you have to just be honest with yourself and say, like, that's what's going to happen. And then Owen also writes in, Sanchez is starting if Quizera slips. Again, Morris Dugan is going to be back. So, like, maybe Ugo Bacharach is the left wing back. I don't know. I like it. But let's kind of wrap things up on a fun note. So for those of you that don't watch the USL show, you need to. You need to be listening to that just as much as you're listening to us. They are a wealth of information, and they did a little fun thing this week called the 90, 50, and 10% outcomes of what they believe, based on those percentages, are most likely to happen. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of take that exercise and bring it back specifically for Rhode Island FC. I think one of the things that they said on the show, by the way, is that they had like a 90% belief that Noah Fuson would become like a first team all USL championship player. So instead of being the second team and being robbed, he would come back to that first team honor. And I love that. I love that 100%. But anyways, I want you to go first because you're always more measured than me. So what are your 90, 50, and 10%?
I'm not a huge fan of predictions, especially where I don't have influence on the outcome. But hey, let's just give it a go anyway. I think the easy one here, 90% chance that RAFC makes the playoffs. This team is too good to miss them. Even if they have an average season, they would realistically have to implode, I think, to miss the playoffs and like have everyone injured. 50%. 50% chance we make the finals again.
Really?
Yeah. And I'd say a 10% chance that we win silverware, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider there's 24 teams in the league, I think that's a decent shot.
Yeah, and I mean, there's technically
multiple options to win.
There's 5 trophies to win, right? There's 5 different types of trophies to win. Okay. 90% for me. I agree with you. We make the playoffs. I wanted to get really cheeky with it and be like, and we make a home field appearance. But with Birmingham Legion loading up the way they are, like I thought we were a shoo-in to at least beat.
The East is still aggressive. Like, it's not going to be a pushover.
Yeah. And so with that being said, like, you've got Louisville, basically the same team. So even if they're
Ray Serrano just signed an extension today, like,
a lot of Lou fans when I went down there, they're not high on Ray Serrano. A lot of them were bagging on him. I don't know why. I'll take him. We'll take him for Rhode Island FC any day of the week. But yeah, you've got Lou, you've got Charleston. Basically, they've lost some, but they still have a lot of talent. Tampa Bay looks to be kind of reinforcing, and then Birmingham Legion, just they look scary, man, for so many different reasons. So I want to say 90% with a home playoff, but I'm not. If this was a 70%, I would go 70. But for 90%, absolutely, we are making the playoffs. There's no way we don't. At 50%, I think we advance. I mean, it's basically 50% is like one way or the other, right? But like, I really think that we advance out of round 3 in the Open Cup. I talked to Kano after one of the games close to the end of the season, and he was always worried about managing the minutes of the team. And I kind of said, like, hey, like, if they keep adding games, like, how serious do you take it? And he's like, look, we're always going to be competitive, right? But what does that mean, right? Does that mean we play people that don't get the chances as often and give them this chance to shine, or do we put our best squad out there so that we can advance. I don't know. I always take that game. Every coach, every player, take it game by game, right? But that being said, I think there's some real merit this season coming up to advance out of the Open Cup, just to wash away last year's performance, right? I think there's I owe it to myself, I owe it to the fans, get at least past the first hurdle. So I want to say there's a 50% chance that we advance out of round 3 into round 4 and we play the Revolution at Tidewater. I'm going to say that because I do think that the stars are aligning. It would just be crazy that we don't get the next home game after we had to play away. I really think that's the stars are aligning. So I got 50% chance that we advance out of round 3. Don't care who the opponent is, don't care where we play, and that we play the Revolution into round 4. And then my 10%, this is the easiest 10%. This should be 90% as far as I'm concerned. But I have a 10% feeling that Steven Turnbull will score a goal against us in one of the 2 face-offs that we will have this season. I mean, that's a for sure thing, right?
Put it out into the world, it's going to happen.
It's how every team knows when you trade away a player, especially a good caliber player, they will score on you the next chance they get. It's just how the world works, man.
What about 1%?
Ooh, 1%. Okay. So with the Jägermeister Cup, there is now an opportunity intra to the league, right? Like internal, that you could win a treble, right? Like the only way to do it before was win the Open Cup, and what hasn't been done since '99 with the Richmond Kickers or whatever. But now with the Jägermeister Cup, you could win the Players' Shield, even though it shouldn't be called that anymore since the schedule's not, there's no parity left. You could win the Jägermeister and you could win the whole thing. So if you're going to be a 1%, I'm going to say we get the treble.
Okay.
Not the quadruple, because the U.S. Open Cup, it's one or the other. How about that? We could win one or the other, but we'll win the treble. So that means we win technically 4 of the 5 trophies for the season. That's my 1%. How about you?
I don't know. I probably similar 1% chance that with the option to have multiple trophies, that I won't go as far as treble, but I'll say a double.
Well, does the double count as the USL Cup final and then the Easter? Because we're gonna make a big deal about being the Eastern Conference final champions. I don't know if you guys understand that. The preseason game we played against the Philadelphia Union 2, that should have been called the Eastern Champions Battle Royale, because they won their Eastern Conference final in MLS Next Pro. We won our Eastern Conference final in USL Championship. Do we call that a cup? Because Brett Johnson, by the way, that's the biggest piece of hardware he's ever won. So don't go against Brett. Don't go against Father Brett.
That was important, but in the grand scheme of things, would you count it as a trophy? So will you look back and say we won a trophy last season? You say we're Eastern Conference champions, but I wouldn't count it as a trophy. Whereas I would say you have to win the Player Shield, or you have to win the cup. Or
disagree. You know why? We need heroes. We need victories. We need celebrations. When we raise that, you're going to be just as excited, clapping and hooting and hollering for game 1 at Tidewater when we lift that banner and we spotlight that trophy wherever it's sitting at the stadium. We could go 5 years and never touch hardware again, and suddenly that trophy's the thing we hold on. It's like in baseball when we won the pennant in '62. That's all you got. That's all you got. What's good? Seattle Mariners. I'm sorry. You've never been to the main event, right? So
I'm not saying we don't count it. I just mean in terms of when you talk about things like a double, a treble, a quadruple, I don't know if you can count that.
Okay. Well, fans, if you want to jump in on whether you should count the trophy or not, please feel free to roast Jason alive in the chat. Matthew Jean writes in 90% RFC finishes top 3 in the East. Wow. Someone's drinking from the Kool-Aid. 50% we win the U.S. Open Cup or Jägermeister Cup. You got to go with one or the other, because the U.S. Open Cup, to win that is probably harder than to win the USL Cup final, in my opinion, that, because you're going to be at some point going against the top MLS team who's taking it very seriously. And 10% we have the highest goal differential. I don't know. Our back line will have some questions this season.
We also ended the season as the 3rd highest scoring team. Granted, Miami helped
goals
us out.
Galore. You got to take that out of the equation. Got to take that out of the equation. Robert Donald replies, new to USL, didn't know there was such a wide gap in talent. That's okay, Robert, and welcome to USL. We hope to see you at Tidewater. It is going to be a very crazy time, but when we see the Open Cup, and again, Revolution, there's still a chance. You live for those moments where, just again, if the ball falls in the right place, there is a factor of luck that comes in no matter how much skill you have. And there's always a chance that a USL team can take it to an MLS team on any day of the week.
It's a very exciting league, I would say.
You're going to love it. You're going to love it. So there's a bunch of questions, but for the sake of time, because we want to wrap things down, we want to keep it tight. We'll record this separately and release it on Monday, the following Monday. So I think we'll wrap it here. We'll answer the questions separately, and you guys can get that kind of as a break in between episode drops. So for there, just a quick reminder, RAFC will play their next opponent in Orlando City this preseason on February 11th before heading to Bermuda to take on the Bermuda National Select Team and the Hearts of Pine in USL 1. Jason, before we wrap up, any final thoughts?
No, can't wait another week. Keep getting closer and closer to the season. We're almost there.
Almost there. I can't wait either. And until then, let's get out of here.
All right, guys, make sure to check out our friends over at the Blazing coverage, including RAFC, and that's at theblazingmusket.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at RAFC Podcast. We've got an Instagram at Raising Anchor, and there's always that website, raisinganchorpodcast.com.
Anchor's up, person who doesn't have a camera.
Anchor's up.